Hello and welcome to our Digital Disruption live podcast. It is the last one of the year, and so this is going to be a wrap from all of us on all of the things that have happened in 2025. I'm joined here today with Chris Williams, Strategy and Transformation Partner at Novus. Hello, Chris.
Hello.
And Pete Gatenby, who is our AI Practice Lead at Novus. Hi, Pete.
Hello.
We were watching back, I was certainly watching back, the conversation that we had at the beginning of the year, where we have our little crystal ball gazing session as to what we think this year is going to have in store for all things home buying and selling. Yeah. And it was a great watch back. I have to say, top marks really for the things that we were certainly looking at as the key areas of focus for the industry. But I thought it would just be really interesting if we went back in time to January and went through some of the points that we picked out, and we can see how well we did on the predictions, but also how far have we come this year and maybe what's in store for us into 2026. The first point that you guys covered, which I think is always the point that should come first, is all about the customer, and we started with customer centricity. So where the market would move past this internal focus on digitalization into a redesigned customer journey that focuses on predictability, transparency, and choice for the customer. So on that point, what have we achieved in 2025, and then what do we think's next for the customer journey in 26?
On the basis you looked at me, that means first, right?
I think it was your prediction, if I remember correctly.
I think it was. Right, how far have we come? I think we have taken massive strides in 2025, as we kind of knew really that we would. We talk about predictions. There's an element of prediction which is a little bit finger in the air, but actually we were making a lot of those predictions based off the data points that were telling us that digital maturity had reached a peak point at the end of 23, 24. We'd seen good strides, but we knew that 25 would be a big step towards customer centricity, because the actors that facilitate the transaction process were beginning to look at how that ultimately was going to be enabled. And so what we saw in 25 was a shift in the vendor landscape, and that becoming very focused on three types of vendors: specialists, who focus on one particular thing, integrators that deliver capabilities to join parts of the system together, and then we had a new class of provider that came into the market, which was your orchestrators. And the orchestration layers are really what starts to enable the lens to really focus on customer centricity, not least because of the lenders and what they want to deliver, which is a much better customer experience. Now, everybody wants to deliver a much better customer experience, but in truth, for a long, long time, the end customer hasn't been at the centre, and that most definitely shifted, and we saw great strides in that shifting, across not just what vendors are trying to do, but what the actors in the process are doing. So certainly from my vantage point, an active sort of on the ground, involved in programs across multiple parties in actually seeing that and delivering it, we saw big strides, and I think we can evidence that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And in the existing ways of working, the existing tech, that's exactly what's happened.
Mm-hmm.
What's been really interesting from an AI vantage point, though, is that a lot of AI initiatives that were focused around the customer have really got stuck at the POC level.
Yeah.
There's not been a lot, really, from a customer experience standpoint, that's got further and beyond that.
Mm.
Now, naturally, we didn't expect there to be robots talking to people and taking people through the mortgage journey right to at this point at the end of 2025. Of course, didn't expect that, but what we did expect was perhaps further leaps forward. What's actually happened is we've realised two things. One, the traditional metrics for unlocking funding or things to progress to a more mature product standpoint from an AI customer-facing standpoint, we're not meeting the grid. Point number one. Point number two is that actually we're starting to see that customers are falling into two camps. Those that are accepting the technology and those that are actually saying, well, no, look, I want humans in that process. Now, again, we expected that to be the case. It doesn't necessarily surprise us. But that has an intrinsic impact on the customer experience and the customer journey, and how lenders and other actors in the process approach that customer experience.
I think for me also, when we talk about what we saw there's kind of three areas to this that you noted, sort of the predictability, transparency and choice. In the predictability arena, what we saw with a big stride in, and this has massively unlocked the ability to be more focused on the customer, has been the adoption of a HDI strategy. Horizontal digital integration isn't just kind of a buzzword, it's a framework, and we know that is front and center on a large number of strategies, from lenders to vendors to conveyancers, estate agency groups. This is a big part of what's happening. That was the big unlock. I think for lenders, and everybody plays a key role in this, but without the lenders, there's no money to borrow, and without the conveyancers, there's no transaction to be facilitated. What we saw is that predictability became the new battleground, because predictability is about unlocking and changing that customer journey, and that's where things became very centric. And as we look to 2026, that new battleground really is now in speed to completion. There's a lot of work that's been done in speed to offer. We talk about AI. AI is the big unlock. As there's a number of big unlocks, but AI is a critical one in the speed to completion. And I think the predictability element of that's really kind of where we've now really heading to. My view is that 2026, I'll go out there on a limb and say it, from my vantage point, I think we're going to be twice as fast, as in terms of the speed for which we've got to do stuff now. Are we going to be twice as fast in actually delivering properties in 2026, executing on a property transaction in 2026? Are we going to halve it? No, I think we won't. We'll certainly make a big impact. But I think the speed of which we now have to execute, it will be twice as fast this year than it was last year, because each year we can see that it's pretty much doubled, or 1.5 at the minimum from 23, and then we're seeing it on. So the pace will continue, and the battleground is speed to offer. Yeah, speed to completion, rather.
Yeah, right of offer is definitely where the battleground is, and where the big efficiencies are.
Yep, 100%.
So if I would sum up your points then, the industry's been on a journey this year to not just look at the customer with their own lens. It's not a mortgage product buyer, a borrower. It's not just somebody marketing a property. Actually, we're looking at the consolidated end customer as an end-to-end transaction, and understanding that we have a role to play within that, but how do we better collaborate to unblock the points of friction along that journey. Great, super important. As we always talk about, the challenge with the property transaction has never really been in the verticals. It's been in the handoffs that sit between the verticals, where there's work to do. So that's good. More to do next year. And to your point about how customers want to engage or leverage or have a journey that's powered by AI, probably two camps. People that this is going to be one of the biggest transactions, if not the biggest they ever make in their life. They would like the security and comfort of having a human in the loop. Others are probably going to be a little bit more forward thinking and think, great, if I can make this go quicker and more efficient and less duplication, bring on the technology. I think the thing that I always reflect on is the challenge that every industry faces right now is what the left field approach with AI is going to be. And there will be people who start to think that they can self-serve much of what happens today in the transaction. The beautiful thing about customers is they're unpredictable. And so, what are they going to do in terms of taking on the tools that they have available to them and seeing what they can actually do as part of that?
Yeah, and what's really interesting is at the moment when we talk about the end-to-end journey, customers are doing that up front. So they're doing it at the broker stage, so the searching for product stage. And what they're doing is they're going to the brokers and saying, look, I found all of this, and they've gone into ChatGPT or another tool and done their research, come out with a load of information, and then they've taken to a broker, and a broker's having to explain to them, actually, you don't qualify for that, you don't qualify for that, this is what you need because of your circumstances. The complex cases are 80% of the cases when you're going through the mortgage journey. And this is where the nuances of what actually happens from a practitioner level will be brought into AI very quickly, because AI can do all of this. It's just no one's embracing the technology at that level yet to do it. And so I think you're absolutely right. Customers are self-serving at the moment and getting the wrong answer, which is why humans in the loop are required. It's the same throughout the process.
Super interesting. You were naughty because you've skipped ahead and started talking about HDI, but we will come and talk about that in a little bit more detail.
Wow.
On to the second point, which is definitely a preface to all things HDI. We signalled that data standards, upfront information was going to be a really important catalyst for the industry this year in redesigning that customer journey, but also in the business itself. It's my hope that it's certainly not news to anybody, because there's been so much progress here. We've got 2 consultations live from MHCLG. We've got huge progress being made with the DPMSG. There's lots of industry collaboration and alignment that's happening there, and then real practical outcomes that are being driven by folks like the OPDA with the Property Data Trust Framework. So huge amounts happening in this space, not least the Smart Data Bill getting royal assent in the summer. We've been working closely with many of these coalitions, these groups of people who are trying to come together and trying to solve those friction points that exist. What are the insights that you're then seeing on the ground, and what's the pathway and sequencing for 26 in all things data and trust frameworks?
I think what we're seeing on the ground is very much the adoption of data standards, and there's 2 very clear camps. There's a camp that's moving very quickly to adopt data standards, and they're adopting that with a very product-led mindset, which means that they can course correct as standards or things may change. Is it going to be one standard? Is there multiple standards? And then on the other side, it's quite binary, actually. I don't know about from an AI standpoint, but was certainly from my vantage point, the other side is not doing really anything about it. That's massively risky, because what's happening is you're not organising and configuring your data to be in a position where, or getting access to data where they can sort of begin to really sort of drive to progress things. So on the ground there is a lot that's happening, but there are 2 very clear camps. I think on the lender side, we're seeing lenders really begin to look at where their gaps are, and they're looking to those orchestration capabilities to say, well, how do we begin to leverage you in order and get to enrich data sets so that we can offer better customer experiences, we can speed up the transaction, we can speed up, increase that speed to completion. That's a major part. And I think what we're also seeing is vendors, especially now, beginning to, especially in that integrator group, beginning to look at how they can leverage what it is that they've got to help facilitate the transaction process. And that's actually really important, because there's a ceiling to vertical growth. So every organization in this ecosystem that facilitates a transaction or provides technology services to facilitate transactions, let's not beat about the bush, they're a commercial enterprise. They need to deliver profits. And that's okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But there's a limit to margin growth from vertical transformation, which is why the horizontal element of this is there's new opportunities that are being unlocked in terms of revenue growth and what that might look like, and scalability. And the data standards bit is really starting to unlock that, because what it's enabling parties to do in the transaction flow is begin to look at where they begin to touch the case, where they begin to enrich their data. There's efficiencies in that, there's new product opportunities in that, and both of those things, of course, unlock margin growth. So on the ground, very much from my vantage point, seeing a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. To echo that, probably this time last year, we were spotting that this was gonna happen, and we were talking about it. What we've seen throughout 2025 is each of the actor groups start to recognise it in their vertical silos, as you just described, they've recognised it, started to look left and right of where the next efficiency gains are, where the next level, to go back to our previous discussion about how can you unlock the next stage from the customer experience standpoint, realise they've got to collaborate left and right, and then said, well, hang on a sec, what's the biggest thing that stops us or slows us down today? Well, it's when data comes into us, whatever that data might be. It might be property data, it might be customer data, whatever that data might be, it comes in, and if it's in a different format to what they're ready, at the moment there's a manual fix. There's manual rekeying in the process, and they're going, well, hang on a sec, that's creating inefficiency. So when they've mapped that customer journey for their portion of the end-to-end journey, that's what they're starting to recognise, which therefore goes, right, hang on a second, how do we fix that problem? From an AI standpoint, there are two trenches of thought. One is AI can deal, and it can deal with a jumble of data. However, it's labour intensive, and so there's cost implication. And actually, it creates inefficiencies in a AI pipeline or an AI end-to-end workflow. Actually, if you can standardise that data all the way through, and suddenly you start to create a world in which you're dealing with standardised data throughout a process, your ability to deploy AI capabilities in that world is exponentially more powerful for a number of reasons. The first is that you create a world that you can, we call it, in the technical world, you call it microservices, but essentially you're taking data in a standardized format and you plug in tools into it. It's like electricity in our house. It's standardized across the UK, which means if I want to plug my hairdryer, not that I have a hairdryer, but if I want to plug a hairdryer at my mother-in-law's house into the wall, I can. It's the same when it comes to a tooling standpoint, and especially from an AI standpoint. And the reason it's so important from an AI standpoint is the technology is evolving around us so fast that we need to rip out and replace things as quick as we can. If we're using external models, LLMs, or other generative AI capabilities, they're evolving at pace, and so we need to be able to plug those in. Why is that relevant to this conversation around data? Well, if the data is not standardized, our ability to react and pivot and course correct throughout the process as technology evolves is drastically limited, which means we can't keep up to the customer expectations. And so the rest of the world will accelerate from a customer experience standpoint, but the home buying and selling industry will be left behind. So that HDI point and how data is horizontally digitally integrated throughout the process becomes incredibly important from an emerging technology standpoint. And as we move forward, that's only going to get more and more difficult, which means it's even more important. So it's really the foundation of everything.
Yeah, and I think that links probably nicely to the sequencing bit, which was the other part of your question. Like what's the pathway in the sequencing as we look ahead now into 2026? I think for me, the sequences is work with a data standard. If you're not doing anything with a data standard and giving yourself the ability to course correct, pivot, whichever way we want to put it, like you're probably setting yourself up for a big fall. Because if you've not got that, other people within your whatever part of the journey you facilitate are definitely doing that. We're talking to and involved with lots of them. So I think the first part of that sequencing is start to organise your data.
And I've been part of these discussions, and this is the reason I'm asking the question, because I'm interested in your guys' view, because we've not talked about it. But do you think that it needs to be mandated for the industry?
What, the data standard?
Yeah.
Do I think it needs to be mandated? Not necessarily. At the end of the day, there will be something that a standard that gets further than the rest, and that becomes the sort of, the de facto sort of commonly used one. I think there's a different question here does that data standard need to be not necessarily regulated in some way, but does it need to have a body, an owner of it to, I think there's probably something in, there's something in that, and but yeah, no, I don't think it necessarily needs to be regulated. It's a big topic, I think, but yeah, sure, off the cuff. What do you think?
As a default, and this is the technology side of me, I don't really like regulation. I don't really like mandates, because I think in a black and white sense of technologist world, it can stifle innovation. But on the flip side, at the moment, in our industry, what I'm seeing, and this is especially the case within AI because the FCA's stance on it that came out earlier this year, is very much that they're not going to add regulation. I know we're talking about the data standards, but the two are integrally linked, in my opinion. But what that created was a lot of discussion about, well, hang on a sec, how do we know what we're supposed to do? And therefore it created indecision amongst the different players. And therefore I get to a standpoint that I'm like, well, there are standards out there. There are multiple standards out there, but there's a clear couple of front runners. Obviously we're involved in the OPDA, and they've with the smart data challenge, they've made huge strides forwards there. And the things we're doing with that conglomerate of organisations is really, really good. But I struggle to see how we can make rapid adoptions of a standard that's not mandated, because there's always going to be people who say, well, that standard's not quite right, so I'm not going to use it for my purposes. But if it's mandated, it's binary. You do it or you don't play. And therefore, if we're to say from a data standard standpoint, it's going to be a massive unlock, as I think it's going to have to be, the quickest route to the goal for me is a mandating. Now, as a technologist, I struggle with that, but that's where I start to land.
Yeah. I can. It would probably speed things up in terms. If you mandate something, that's it. Things come to speed, but it's a trade-off, isn't it? Yeah. You know, I think the industry is moving at a pace. We've seen it in the last 12 months. Yeah. We saw it the 12 months before. We're going to see it again in the next 24 months. We've seen a lot of change. We're now in the transformation journey. That's the cool bit, and I think that this is the bit where we'll see such rapid transformation that people will get left behind or go and without wishing to sound sort of too dramatic, it's like if you're not involved in this kind of stuff and looking at standards, mandated or otherwise, you're kind of sleepwalking your way into irrelevance.
Oh, definitely.
I will wade in just on that point, because I think it's an important question to ask. If you have sat in, which I know you have, many of the industry sessions that are garnering opinion and asking people to collaborate, the message from industry is strong. You know, they do want a direction. This is where we're going, and this is where we're all going. I think the industry has been burnt by lots of misdirection in the past. What I would say is I don't think calling for that mandate from a government or a regulator is something we've got time to do. It doesn't mean to say it won't happen, but I don't think we've got time to do it. And the reason I say that is, for all the things that you guys have talked about, there's so much progress already in the industry. Actually, what it calls for is just industry to get behind a direction.
Yeah.
And I think, go on, sorry.
Well, I was going to take us on to the FCA. I think it's exactly the same opinion, and it's actually their stance, which is like, look, if we regulate around the utilisation of AI within the financial services arena, we'll slow you down. And if we slow you down, the UK as a whole won't be able to compete with the world. We're already falling behind. So you guys crack on, you've got the guidelines, you've got the principles, follow those, and you'll be okay.
I think this brings back, for me anyway, to the sort of sequencing point, which is, I guess, the other part of that question, really. And this is really important for people to listening or watching this to take into 2026. Like, sort of what is that sequencing? It is about organising and reconfiguring to enable scale, and that sequencing is get the data, either select a standard or be flexible around a standard. And the next part of that, from a data point of view, is then really begin to test and deploy. We've seen a lot of talk around this stuff, but there's no excuses to not be testing now. It doesn't take huge amounts of heavy lifting to be able to look at where your data gaps are, look at how organized data that's enriched could change, improve things for you on whatever part of the journey that you're on, that you facilitate. We're seeing all of this happening, and then test it, trial it. You can do, that doesn't have to be a technology POC. That can be literally done with spreadsheets and leveraging AI tooling to be able to do this at rapid pace and then see what it could do at scale. And there are so many use cases where you can apply that. So for me, that's critical. Your sequencing is important. You've got a config problem, and we say that a lot, not a tech problem.
Yeah. So I will let you wax lyrical some more about HDI now, because it's on to that point. We did talk about the adoption of horizontal digital integration as the strategic framework for this industry. Hopefully, that is something that people understand now as a term, as a concept. We've spent a lot of time helping educate on where this industry is and going, and that pathway really is laid out by an HDI framework. For those who perhaps are not on a very considered HDI journey, or understand it but don't necessarily know what to do next, how should they be thinking about bringing HDI into their business, and how do they get started with implementing an HDI strategy?
Give us a ring. Give us a call. Chris@novus-strategy.com. Job done. No, joking aside, look, it's a really important question. Where I would start with this is HDI is now mainstream language. This is embedded in government, industry bodies. It's increasingly used by players in the market. It is a line that sits on strategy documents that we see across the ecosystem from all different actor groups. So if you are unclear about what HDI means to you or how to leverage it and where to start, the honest answer is to look at the role that you play in the ecosystem, because for each actor group it will be different. But fundamentally, the similarity is that you are no longer an independent vertical player. You never have been. For you to be able to leverage HDI, which will unlock the next phase of growth in your organization, you need to look left and right of you in the ecosystem. You need to do two things. You need to identify where you leverage technology that isn't your technology, i.e. you leverage vendors, and you want to be running I would be doing audits on those vendors to understand what their HDI strategy is, because literally whatever that is either going to limit you in terms of what you can do next in this new world, because, make no bones about it, the customer journey is getting redesigned. You're either part of that or it's going to happen to you. If it happens to you, the vendor landscape for which you leverage to deliver the services that you offer, whether you're a law firm, a broker, whatever, that's going to impact you. So you've got to understand what their capabilities are in terms of the vendors that you're leveraging. If you've got your own technology stack and you've built your own technology, and you might be a vendor, you clearly need a HDI strategy, because your customers are now going to start asking you for one. Those that have listened to this will do. And if you are an actor in the ecosystem that has got your own technology capabilities, you need to be auditing your technology stack to understand how flexible it is for reconfiguration, because we are now having to start to reconfigure where that technology capability is going to be leveraged. And every organization that sits in this ecosystem, whether they like it or not, is a tech business that delivers a service. If you're a law firm, you're a technology company that delivers legal services. If you're a broker, you're a tech company that delivers brokering services. If you're a estate agent, you're a tech company that provides estate agency services. So as technology companies, you need to be product-led, not delivery-led, and that's critically important. And they're the bits that I would be looking at for HDI.
Big to-do list.
Yeah, but an important one.
I think you nailed it, to be honest. Yeah.
We'd like to think so. I have to do this as a day job.
I do have a question, because it's something that certainly on our conversations and travels we hear often, and do have an important response to it. But I think for those that are listening today and thinking this is something that I need to start thinking about, I need to put somewhere on my roadmap, but it feels like it's a a next or a later thing, because right now I'm busy. I've got transformation programs that are in flight that are about, putting in new origination capabilities, ripping out core banking, changing provider, changing vendor, doing some modernization around my tech stack. How do that? We've talked about the importance of HDI and HDI now. When we receive that challenge, what would be the response to it?
This isn't part of. This is kind of a part of that exercise. In truth, you've got to map your ecosystem. You've got to assess your interoperability maturity. Now, this isn't HDI strategy. Isn't heavy lifting. That's probably my big key takeaway for people listening to this, watching this, would be this isn't another huge heavy lifting transformation project. This will actually enable and unlock better efficiencies, better outcomes in your origination transformation or whatever transformation journey you've got going on at the moment. The reality is it's probably a 2 to 3 year thing that you've got in there, and the advancements of technology and the speed for which we are now moving in this sector, which is good. And Claire, I've seen you talk about this a lot, and you obviously, under your stewardship to us, we talk to clients about it. It's whatever was on that piece of paper, fold it in half and stick a pencil through it, because that's the speed we now need to move. So for me, it is all about whatever those big transformation programs were, modularize those and move them down, because if you don't embed the HDI element into that, they are probably destined for failure in some way. And a classic example of this is not assessing the vendor landscape. You could be locked into a closed loop platform provider or originate, whatever it is, that gives you a capability that's fit for purpose today, but is not future proof, because your procurement capabilities and how you look at them and assess them is not matched to what's coming down the track. In fact, actually, let me rephrase that. That's here. It's not coming down the track, it's here. And that's quite frightening when we've done some of the stuff that we've done in the last 12. When I think about some of the assessments that we've done, and we've looked at some of this, there's been some pretty big, look, there's a warning sign there, and it's not changed the direction with the vendor necessarily, but what it has absolutely done is unlocked the opportunity to begin to negotiate how that needs to evolve over time. And that went to frighten people, that's a big thing.
Well, practically, what you're describing, right, is a component in an end-to-end process.
Yeah.
So when you have a piece of technology from a provider, it's typically a component, right? And left and right of that component, things need to happen all alongside it. And so you're absolutely right. If you're not considering the HDI implications of the technology procurement decisions that you're making, the efficiency is going to be limited. And that's what we've been seeing in the last phase of transformation, is we've hit the limit already. So you're just going to get more of the same. There is no more. You're already at that limit. So if you don't start to consider how that plays up and down in the process, then you're never going to gain further efficiencies. And that manual rekeying that happens after the origination of a mortgage into, the underwriting process or something, will still need to happen.
There's something that you reminded me of there when you've just been explaining that, is in the last quarter alone, we've been involved in conversations whereby organisations have come to us and said that let's get this done next year.
Yeah.
We're not ready for this bit now because we're currently doing exactly what you just said, Claire. We're working on this, but we're working on that bit. And it's dead interesting because we're obviously responding to, but actually it's really important that you do this now. This comes back to your sequencing question. You've got to do this stuff now, not after, because you might already be tied in. That is kind of my rally cry, really, like get it in now. This is such a fundamental foundational piece that if you're not doing it now, we're all getting busy. But in terms of your monthly, quarterly sort of check-ins on where are we versus plan on that kind of strategy and the delivery and everything else, all of that stuff has to kind of move a needle. It has to unlock something that's driving shareholder value, growth, profitability, new connections, whatever. The reality is that all of that won't happen if you've not got this bit HDI strategy bit sort of nailed underneath it, and it should be feeding into every aspect of what you're doing. And what we've seen is those that have really embraced this last 12 months, when I look at now their plans for the next 12 months, which we're involved in, and we're seeing what's happening in 2026 and the pathways and roadmaps, like they are unlocking things at such pace versus where we can see where we're just getting started with some organisations. You think, well, actually, you know, there's the difference. You know, there's some real big gains to be had here, but you've got to get it in now.
You talk about this a lot, and I think it's absolutely the right language. It's the difference between being on a path and not accepting or understanding where the industry's going and having to pivot, which is where none of us want to be. We all know how much value, time, waste happens when we go through pivots in business. But what HDI allows people to do, even if they're just starting, midway through, completing whatever that transformation program looks like, is to course correct. And the sooner you can course correct, where it's not wasted efforts, it's not putting things in the bin and starting again, that has to be valuable. That just simply has to be valuable.
Yeah, it does. And you know, you were saying this in a session earlier today, you know, about the difference between pivot and course correct. I think it's such a great call out, actually. You know, in years gone by, when kind of agile transformations were a thing, you know, 10 years ago, it was kind of like, you know, oh yeah, we've got to be ready to pivot. It was kind of a cool sort of phrase, wasn't it, really? But I mean, if you're pivoting today, it's kind of like, that's probably a little bit telling of kind of how the business is organised and configured, because you shouldn't really be pivoting. You should be course correcting, because
pivot is a reaction.
Yeah, exactly. It's a reaction to something that's not, and it's like, well, you're not ahead of this.
Yeah, you're not out in front.
You're not out in front. So the course correct is actually, we've got data, intelligence, and information that means we can correct the course to the destination that we were heading on. You know, we if I may point to it, I think about the executive immersion day that we ran a few weeks ago, in aviation. One of the things we talked about there was about being 1 degree off track. And being 1 degree off track requires a pivot, usually when you get towards a destination. And if you've been travelling at 1 degree off track, that is a severe off track point, location that you end up at. And we actually, you know, we were able to demonstrate it with them in simulators and everything else. And I think that was a big moment for them, because that was something else you touched on when running the AI parts of that was, look, if you actually configured yourself in this way, HDI was underpinning your strategy, actually that course correction, because you'd have been checking where are we, and those pulse checks on the area, you wouldn't have had to make those pivots, burnt fuel, whatever else. I mean, in the situation that we were demonstrating them in, they were, you know, you'd run out of fuel and you were heading down to earth at quite a fast pace. But that is the reality of business. If you are not configured properly,
and underpinning the direction that you're going with the strategy that can help you course correct, it becomes very expensive and timely.
Yeah.
I'm just going to explain very quickly before I lead into this next question what I mean by taking the piece of paper and folding it in half, because I am an absolute space nerd. And for anybody who knows how to explain a wormhole, it's exactly that. It's folding space-time and sticking a hole in between 2 points. People can tell me that they don't exist, but I don't believe them, because it's in Interstellar, so you know that's just gospel. But AI, I think, is an interesting thing to liken to a wormhole, because it is an accelerant to a destination like nothing we have seen in technology for decades. I was listening to quantum computing, and that's potentially one of the next steps, but that's a fair way off, and Willow is very much in test phase. But AI is that wormhole right now that's taking us on a accelerated journey to an end destination. So we can't not talk about AI. I know everybody sometimes has a bit of a moment, but I think it's because it's not yet fully understood how to leverage it. We're getting there. But you talked about at the beginning of the year this idea of isolated experiments. We're still very much in that experimental phase. Do you think we have moved on from the isolated experiments? And if not, what's holding us back, the industry back, from a much more deeper engagement with the capabilities of AI?
So there are three camps, interestingly. One is those who are doing the isolated experiments and then are realising that they're getting to the point that the tests aren't being successful. And what I mean by that is the traditional metric when you're doing a POC of a product is, has it achieved the objective at a cost at which, sorry, let me start that again. Have we achieved the objective where the cost is below what the cost is below what the return is? That's a much better way of describing it. I'm sure people who are much more eloquent than me could make better words for that. But that's trench one. And they're finding we're not getting out of that stage because the cost is negative. Well, the cost benefit analysis is coming out negative, so they never get past POC because they can't get further investment, blah, 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 blah. The second one is those who are looking at the industry and saying, oh wow, everything's moving so fast, I don't know what to do, and they get decision paralysis. And so they're essentially doing nothing. And they're waiting for it to happen around them to decide what that decision might be. Now there's other reasons why they might be that. It might be to do with their underlying data structures and everything else, which means we don't think they're ready, etc., etc. But essentially, it amounts to the same. They're burying their head in the sand. The third trench, which is much, much smaller, and I'll be honest with you, it's very small in this industry, is those that are saying, well, I know AI is coming. I don't know what's going to land and what's going to stick from a technology standpoint, but by God, I need to be ready for it. And so what they're doing is they're setting up a team, setting up a unit of people across their business, across capabilities, to deploy AI and essentially begin to test it internally, test it externally with client-facing products, and begin to build that muscle memory from an AI product standpoint, an AI technology standpoint. That means as AI matures as a technology and begins to be embedded across the world as it already is, they're ready. What does that mean in practice? Well, they are doing the tests, but they're measuring them in significantly different ways. They're running POCs. They are running the traditional test from a product standpoint to see whether they've been successful, but they're also saying, well, look, we know that we need to learn. What's the byproduct of that? Well, they're counting their learnings. How many POCs are we doing? What's the velocity of testing? What are the number of technologies from an external model standpoint, if you're pulling in LLMs, that we're able to integrate with and switch between? What's the kill switch? What's the maturity of our internal people to accept AI as a capability so we can start to deploy that? How are we empowering them with different AI tools? And so they're looking at it from this vantage point to say, well, look, we're not an AI first lender yet, but we know that that's going to be the winner probably in 2027. That's where everyone's looking at, 2027. So 2026 is a big year, is a bit of a spoiler alert. But what does an AI first lender look like in 2027? Well, okay, if that's what it's going to look like, I best make sure I look like that now so that I can start to embrace it as we move through 2026, ready for 2027. And that's the three trenches. Those who are testing and then not getting out of test, those who are doing nothing, and those who are testing and taking the learnings and just getting ready for when the capability matures.
What's been interesting for me, I think, through 25, and we're seeing it now, and we'll see more of it into 26, is the importance of having a horizon scan.
Oh, massively, yeah.
So traditionally, boards would always have horizon scans that would probably be refreshed maybe once a year, or so every few years, because you'd have this 5-year plan or a 10-year plan, whatever. But I remember when we did the live podcast in the summer, one of the questions that was posed was about timings, and I said, I think you need to be moving in 18-month cycles now, like not 3-year, 5-year cycles, 18-month cycles. But you need horizon scanning taking place on a regular basis. And I think about the horizon scans that we produce that feed into those that have made those decisions, that those in that tranche 3 camp, which is actually the very progressive camp, they've got the horizon scans taking place. This comes back to all of the stuff that we've just been talking about historically. What's the sequencing? Check the horizon scan. Where should we be leveraging HDI? Check the horizon scan. And all of those, because it's so quick and so fast paced, it then feeds into that. How should we be configured? Configure the organization to be responsive and adaptive. But fundamentally, your transformation journey is going to look like these. Here's the area to focus on the battleground. It's no longer speed to offer, it's speed to completion. but it stems from that horizon scan. And I think that was a big one for me, especially on the AI piece, because Claire, as you set out at the start of this sort of question point on this particular topic, is that like it is a bit of a, you know, everyone's in AI or whatever else, but there's so much money that gets like splashed on it because, you know, execs are like, oh shit, we better go and do that, and but without any real kind of focus or attention on outcomes. How is this going to benefit customer experience, we can't be left behind. But if you're walking into it blind, then that's going to be problematic. To get to that point, horizon scan, it's got to be done regularly, often, to inform that direction of travel.
I think I won't name names, but we certainly hear on our travels that people feel like they're adopting AI because Copilot's been released to the business. And I am sure that there are clever individuals in those businesses who are figuring out cool things to do. I think the thing that we haven't got time to do with AI, because there are some very clever people doing some very clever things already, is let people make the, you know, I'm drinking a beer app on my phone, you know, which is what we saw when mobile first came out. It was lots of apps that were fairly useless, and it took time to create things that were really meaningful, useful, that we are now all terribly addicted to, but we don't have that time with AI. So no. I think if we feel like AI is there because it's accessible, we're not actually achieving what we need to do. There are so many use cases and benefits to really understanding how to unlock the value of AI. That's the bit that we've got to get to.
And another lens to look at that, if you look back at history with Web 1, Web 2, so you just referred to sort of mobile. I remember the Carlin app very well. Yeah. What's historically always happened is the business to consumer environment has been the one that's driven. That's where the majority of the money has been spent, and then the B2B world has kind of followed up and picked up the pieces of all that. Yeah, that was gimmicky, but we could use that there and leverage it here. That world's gone because that's not happening now. Like which is why we kind of wax lyrical about this. How you configured matters. It's not a tech problem, it's a config problem, because actually you don't have that. That used to be the old horizon scan. The horizon scan today is looking into the future, assessing the data elements, but then beginning the testing of things yourself to be able to feed into your direction of travel to enable your course corrects to make that happen. We don't have the gimmicky stuff to look at. There is some gimmicky stuff out there, but the world's changed. That those are old models that are not relevant in the world we exist in anymore, and they're frankly not there.
And in truth, in AI, that's exactly what we're seeing with the traditional PLC models. Yeah, there's still a place for them, but AI, if you apply it through the lens of AI, it's only part of the story. And actually, if you follow that blindly because that's your approach that you follow, then it's going to steer you wrong, and you're not ready for the next phase.
Yeah.
We also mooted a couple of points on the movement of money and sustainability. So being plugged in to the programs that are happening with the Bank of England, so synchronisation, programs that are happening now, pilots with UK Finance around GBTD, the Regulated Liability Network. Is this still important into next year? And should people be considering it in their strategy? I ask that because they have been fairly long programs. So
the short answer for me is absolutely yes. And the reason is that they have been long programs and there's been delays in some of that. But the world of payments and how money is moved across all asset classes isn't changing, it's transforming. And that transformation will impact this industry sector, 100% guaranteed. So should you be doing something with it? Potentially. But you definitely need to be observing and staying close to what's happening. Again, it's that horizon scan. It's absolutely relevant in 2026. Right now, we know that the Bank of England, with their synchronisation project or program, is moving into a phase whereby they will begin to, they're opening a synchronisation lab that will kickstart in January of 2026. And over that 10 months, they will test in live use case environments money transactions. Now, the way to look at this is to think about what happens post contracts exchange. So we're now moving past the sort of completion arena into settlement and lodgement. There's a whole pillar of work, and one of our guys actually laid this out, and he put it into sort of 5 sort of tranches of activity that takes place across the home buying and selling journey. And in pillar 5, the kind of big moment was pillar 5 will go, like that'll be gone. It morphs into pillar 4. Now, when you actually look at the effort, the work, the things that take place in pillar 5, for lenders, they're going to love the fact that it's going to disappear, because it removes massive risk for them. It removes effort. It removes areas of issues that come from requisitions, and 50% of requisitions, if not more, I think it is, are because of mistakes that get made. So all of that starts to disappear. So that this is important, so that they're not going to do this. To the timing point, we were saying, I think it was last year and the year before, we're 4 years out. A few years ago, last year it might have been 3 years out. But we're only a couple of years before this stuff starts to become pretty mainstream. So how does it impact you? If you're a law firm, what's that going to mean to you? Wherever you sit in the ecosystem, and with the orchestrator capabilities coming into this market to allow that full end-to-end digital transaction, payments is absolutely going to be a part of it. It's absolutely going to be a part of it. Then we look at the UK finance element and what they're doing with changed name from regulated liability net. What was it? I can't remember. Yes, and tokenized deposits, smart contracts. All of this stuff is innovation, and it's happening. It's not being talked about. It's actually happening, and these things are being pulled together in live pilots to facilitate stuff. So, that's the longer answer. The short answer is yes, it's absolutely something that we should be considering and looking at in 2026, and it will continue to evolve. The longer answer is that this is happening, and it's going to happen.
We say often that one of the things that businesses in the industry need to think about is what the future business model looks like. And it is an important thing that when they go through this HDI strategic framework and applying that to the business, and then leveraging the horizon scans, the role of the business is going to change. The model of the business, it has to, if we're redesigning the customer journey. But there are important infrastructural changes that are happening in this industry that certain actors in this group really need to be aware of. I'm sort of signalling at the moment, but like the conveyancing world, we all thought a couple of years ago that following a few misdemeanors with some law firms, that the regulators would take away the idea or the notion of solicitors holding client funds. That never really materialised. But underneath, the innovation drum of payments has not stopped. And suddenly we're potentially looking at a completely new way for consumers to move money, or consumers, in fact, and business, because as you said, the use cases are really broad across all asset classes. But sort of left of centre, there's innovation, infrastructural transformation that's happening. And that will require people to look at the business model, and it will have significant changes. And so, the point about the technology optimization, you're a technology business that delivers conveyancing services, that efficiency, that technology optimization becomes even more important. And sort of having that broad understanding of just the pace of innovation across many industries, but certainly those that then touch and feed into and impact the home buying and selling arena is super important.
It really is. And I think there's opportunity in it as well. There's actually a lot of opportunity. For some vendors, it's, this could be new revenue opportunities. For conveyancing firms who, for client accounts disappearing, that might be quite a scary thought. But it's also opportunistic. Will this have an impact on insurance costs? There's lots of things in there that I think sometimes, again, especially within this industry sector historically, there's been a lot of stuff spoken about that's almost been over-egged. And so there's this transformation fatigue. There's a fatigue of, vendors. Yeah. It's like we were talking before about, cost of things, that, the plumber's response, not sure about that. In this industry, there's an eye roll, isn't there? Whenever there's like a vendor comes out with some swanky new piece of kit that they say they're going to change the world with, there's an eye roll, and I understand it, and it's absolutely reasonable. But my point is that there's opportunity in this, as with all advancements in technology. There's a few bum steers as well, and it's about just leaning into it. As a phrase that we often use, lean into it, keep an eye on it, keep that horizon scan. For most of you, for some of you, this could be pretty opportunistic, so you might want to be adjusting and looking at how you can partner, even buy, build in, and lean into these sorts of things, because actually there could be some great stuff that happens here. But time will tell. But 2026, we will definitely see advancements in that payments arena. And I think that the blockchain and the AI advancements and smart contracts is absolutely going to come into the mix. And as Pete quite rightly pointed out earlier, 27, we're going to see a lot of stuff happening, but it's all going to be based on the foundation elements that are done in 26.
So as we wrap then for today, not least because we've got people to watch for a fairly long time, but it's also unseasonably hot in here. For the middle of December, I am too overdressed. Is there anything else that, as we gaze into the crystal ball of 2026, that we think people should be aware of, or significant changes coming, or is it all just a continuation of the above?
I'll go first. AI is going to evolve. It is evolving. We look outside the industry for the fastest innovations. Agentic AI is here in other industries. It's coming into our industry. If you think about any part of the process, agentic AI can pretty much disrupt it and will disrupt it. Beyond that, we won't see this in 2026. I'd be hesitant to say it before 2030, if I'm really honest. Is AGI, which is going to be where it gets really, really interesting.
For those who don't know what AGI is,
artificial general intelligence. So we just add another letter into the acronym, but
we just don't have enough acronyms in this industry.
Yeah,
we just thought we'd throw in a new one.
but look, AGI is where the tech firms of the world, the Nvidias of the world, the OpenAIs of the world are trying to get to, which is artificial general intelligence, essentially human-esque decision making at scale without the need for clear defined workflows. So essentially a human-esque intelligence. Now there's something came out this week that a company in Tokyo, a startup in Tokyo, thinks they've got there. I don't think they have, but because the underlying limit for this is actually electricity, but we won't go into that story. But that's where this world's going to go, and if you start to apply that lens to how the traditional home buying and selling process works, the world's going to change significantly at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Will it see the end of lenders and conveyancers? No, it might see the end of some of them, and how fundamentally how they do things will change, which is why the fundamentals and the foundations that we talk about today are so important, because all of that in truth is underpinned by data, HDI, and technology capabilities. So all the things that we talk about all day, every day, is what's going to prepare organisations for that future.
I think it will be a continuation of 25. I think what we've now got is a nice, steady, stable foundation to build upon. But as Pete has just highlighted very clearly, that foundation is critical. And if you don't do it, you're going to be massively disrupted. So it's a continuation. Is there anything in addition that to come into the mix there? I think we're going to see maybe towards the end of the year, but I think we're probably going to see movements in those data standards becoming not necessarily mandated, but certainly more mainstream. I think that'd be the big one for me. We'll see that because of the volume of people that begin to adopt a particular standard.
You've got momentum.
And the momentum's there. And so, but other than that, it's absolutely a continuation. I think 24 and 25 were great stabilizers and foundational areas to begin to get we reached the peak levels of digital maturity. across the sort of the landscape to enable this kind of big growth push, and that's now what we're seeing. So it's a continuation of that. I think one of the potential friction points, though, when we talk about digital maturity, potentially is whilst we've got the digital maturity in each of the core component areas and in each of the actor groups, digital maturity to be able to drive horizontal digital integration and begin to move this forward, where we may see a lag is in the pace for which these businesses can adopt their operating models to more product focused, because even the vendors are kind of quite switched on to the product led sort of world. But there will be organizations in the ecosystem that are slower to do that. Now, what we need to continue is that the digital maturity continues to evolve and adapt at the same rate across all of the, across the horizontal, because if it doesn't, that's where we'll start to see, again, friction points coming in. But I believe that we're in a good place to prevent that.
So thank you. I hope to everybody listening that was interesting. If you have any questions, or we've talked about anything in there that you agree with, you don't agree with, and want to have a good old debate with us, you can come and get in touch, novus-strategy.com. I'm sure you can find one of our contacts floating around somewhere. To all of our customers, thank you very much for a wonderful year. To everybody that has engaged with us, come and played a part in some content, been out flying planes, come and spoken on panels with us, to our partners, a massive thank you. It's been a great fun year, and I wish everybody a very, very happy Christmas, a very happy New Year, and I can't wait to get going on what is going to be a foundational year ahead of big transformation in 2027.
Hear, hear.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah.